My name is Fadi Seva. I'm a South Bay activist, as many of you know, most of you do know. I was, just give you a little history, I was on the KPFA, at first lab, local advisory board, then LSB, local station board. I was a member of the first elected group after the protests of 1999. And I was on that, and during my tenure, I was on it for about 6 years or 7 years. I saw some dramatic changes and rifts, and as a result, I've stayed involved, trying to make sure for a democratic Pacifica, KPFA being the flagship station, but one of 5 stations. The other 4 stations are KPFK in LA, KPFT in Houston, Texas, WBAI in New York City, and WPFW in Washington, D.C. So those are the 5 main stations. And then, of course, through affiliates like in Fresno and Santa Cruz, we even reach a greater number of people. So KPFA is an amazing thing. I want to also mention that this forum right here, this panel discussion, and I sent an invitation to all candidates through the KPFA website platform. So all candidates were invited here. It appears, the only public community forum during this entire election period in the entire Bay Area, which is obviously distressing, right? Because there should be many of these events throughout. But I am glad it's happening here because we do, all of us here, want a healthy KPFA. All right, I would like to introduce our 4 candidates here. There are more candidates, obviously. We have Steve Zeltzer right next to me. Right next to Steve Zeltzer is Fatma Vinasethampi. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Next to him is Rich Stone, and finally, someone who was one of my co-conspirators on the board 20 years ago is Stan Woods. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you for driving all the way down to San Jose.
And I believe we'll have one more. Donna is en route, I believe.
Okay, so another candidate is en route. Okay, and so once she arrives, she'll just take a seat. Oh. All right. So the question is, how many people are on the board? What is the composition of the local station board? What is the term? How long is the term of the boards? Correct? Anything else? What does the board do? Okay, good questions. So the local station board, and of course you'll need to correct me on this because memory has failed me, it's been so long since I've been on the board. The board is made of both staff members and community, non-employees. All right. So the candidates that you have before you, the 4 candidates, and I presume Donna as well, Stan, are community members. The community, those who donate to KPFA $25 or more a year, get to vote for community candidates. All right, and they're 2/3 of the board, I believe. The other third are staff members who are elected by their peers. So essentially, the 2 segments, community members and staff members, are voted for by their peers, by members of the community, by members of staff. And with the staff, though, this forum is not about staff, there are the volunteers and the paid staff, correct? Correct. Yes. The composition of the board is 14?
22.
Or 22. I think the lab was 14. It's 22 members, which is a very large board. It meant to be very democratic and bring as many voices as possible. And so currently, these 4 candidates are all with the Rescue Pacifica slate. It's a block, and so you have slates, or it's like, Democratic Party, Republican Party, Green Party, of sorts. It's a slate of candidates that are aligned together with like-minded thoughts and ideas. There are 8 candidates, I believe, that are part of Rescue Pacifica. There are 8 candidates, and there are approximately 14 on
9 are up.
Yeah, no, I meant for the other side. The other slate has about 14. They have 14 candidates. In total, there are 9 seats that are up for election. Now, the question is, how is this? The entire board is not obviously up for election at the same time. It's every 3 years, so the term is 3 years long. So you'll have an election, say, this year, 2024, and 2023. I already want the school year over. 2023. You may have an election next year, 2024, because it's a 3-year term. It's not an even number. So there will be every other year, then every 2 years, then every other year, then every 2 years. So that's how the campaigns work with KPFA. The question is, what does the board do? They are theoretically supposed to have quite a bit of power to be able. So KPFA is not a standalone organization. It's part of the Pacifica Foundation. As I mentioned, there are 5 stations nationwide. KPFA, we call it the flagship station because it's the first one. And as a result, it's the first one. It's the strongest one financially overall, and therefore listener base as well. KPFK in LA is probably the second strongest one in terms of listenership and fundraising. And KPFK also houses the archives, which are a very important part of the Pacifica Foundation. These archives, so for those of you who are not aware, NPR started in 1973, I believe. The idea of NPR was actually as a commercial-free station system was based off of Pacifica, which started in 1949. So this was, in Berkeley, truly ahead of its time in this country, in that sense. And the archives, the things before 1973, before NPR, KPFA and its sister stations had interviews with individuals that no other commercial-free public interest station had. And so they have these amazing archives from the 60s, from the 50s, and even 1949. So you have these amazing archives, and they are housed down in LA, and that's where they have a special day of fundraising in November to help that. What is the power or work of the local station board? And I will need the 4 of you to help me out here. They do, so the local station board, of the 22 members, 2 are sent or are elected by these 22 to be the KPFA representative to the Pacifica National Board. Exactly, PNB members, Pacifica National Board. The Pacifica National Board oversees all financial aspects of the 5 total stations. All right, of the 5 total stations. They run the whole gamut. And at times, some people in the Bay Area feel they're infringing on KPFA's finances. And this will be a conversation later on, because it's a question of, are we all by ourselves, or are we part of a network of 5 stations? And that's a very important philosophical question, right, to be had. Do we want a strong Pacifica or just a strong KPFA in our own bubble, in other words, right? So that's a very important conversation to have, and I hope it will be addressed by the 4 of you at some point. So the Pacifica National Board is in that level. When I was on the board, we had the first year was advisory, and then it became formalized with a lawsuit, and we became the local station board. As a local station board, it has some governance control, including the general manager hiring and so on. The evaluation of the general manager. Oh, that's right. The final hiring and firing is by the Pacifica National Board Executive Director.
Basically, if there's a tie, if there's a dispute between the PMB and the LSU.
Why don't we let him?
Yeah. So
Well, I just-
yeah. So there are these things, and then also at one time there used to be something a very important part. The the KPFA Program Council. This was a council of paid and unpaid staff members, as well as a couple of local station board members from KPFA. And they helped.
And listeners.
And listeners as well. And listeners. And they would meet in public situations where everyone was allowed to attend. And they would go over the schedule. Because there are only 24 hours in a day. I mean, you can't have an infinite number of programs when you only have 24 hours. So what programs do we place, and when do we place them, and so on? That was a very important forum, and that was very powerful to have input from the community, not just from the board members, but as was just clarified, also from community members, straight community members. The general manager, I believe in 2006, nixed that, got rid of it, stopped meeting with them, and made his own changes as they wished. And it has never been come back since then, I don't believe, but maybe I've missed. It has not been coming back. And that is an issue, because we have programs that are repeated. And I'm sure Steve will talk about Ian Masters, but he's on the show bright and early in the morning, and then again 3 to 4. And 3 to 4 we had other programs. Labor programming is no longer there. Guns and Butter is no longer there. So there were many programs that have been let go, but have not been upfront, has 2 different time slots. So these are shows. I'm not saying they're good, I'm not saying they're bad. I'm only saying is that there's only 24 hours. Should the community help make decisions as to what programs go where, or types of programs? What I would like to do now is have the candidates take up to 5 minutes to introduce themselves and why they're running for the board. Have they run before? How in what ways have they been involved, and so on and so forth. We'll begin to my right, and we'll just go down the line. Steve?
Okay. So, well, first of all, I want to thank the FADI and the San Jose Peace Center for hosting the only public meeting of KPFA candidates, and we're open to all candidates. That's why it was announced to the listeners and the members that anyone could come and speak if they were a candidate. I think that's a good thing, and I think we need to have more democratic practices at KPFA and Pacifica, so the supporters, the listeners, and the members can participate. And it is a state of the time that this is the only one happening. So I think the Peace Center, what we're talking about today in relationship to the Peace Center, and one of the reasons we're running, is that we face a danger of a world war. There's more money being spent on war now, trillions of dollars by the military, than ever. And the end of the Cold War was supposed to be peaceful. It ended up not being peaceful, because despite the fact that the Soviet Union was no longer a threat, the United States continued to spend trillions of dollars on military and surrounding Russia, really, even though they promised that they would not, NATO would not surround Russia. So we're in a war now. and there's a danger also of a war in Asia. And just this past weekend, President Biden met with the president of Korea and the Prime Minister of Japan and wants to set up a new U.S. military alliance. Another NATO in the Asia. We got a NATO in Europe, and we want another one in Asia. Now, KPFA was set up as a institution that was for peace. It was against war, and Lou Hill, who was the founder, was a pacifist. So I believe that we have to go back to our roots at KPFA and Pacifica. We're the only network, independent network from corporate media. And I say NPR is part of corporate media because I was just looking at Channel 9 this morning, and you have ads on commercial ads on Channel 9. So we don't want that. And also at Channel 9, they got rid of their elected board, and they have an appointed board. And guess what? Most of the people appointed are, the hurricane has come to San Jose. Hillary. Yeah. The Hillary has come. Oh, no. So, and most of those people who are appointed are corporate people. And so we don't want that at Pacifica and at KPFA. We want an elected board that represents the community. Now, one of the differences is the present, they call themselves the protectors, supported a bylaw change, which people voted on, which basically corporatized the board. It got rid of the authority of the local station board to review the managers and also approve the budget. Now, since the end of the program council, which Fadi was a member of, there haven't been evaluations of the programs. Now, that's the job of the manager. He got rid of the program council, which was doing evaluations, and there have been no evaluations of the programs. On my program called Work Week, which was on KPFA for many years, was removed, and he said, we want to go in another direction over one-day notice. Nobody evaluated the program. I think we have to have a democratic process. We have to have some evaluations of the program and the manager. The managers have been not evaluated for 7-8 years. The previous manager was never evaluated. That's the job of the local station board. And the protectors who are running did not carry out their responsibilities. They opposed setting up an evaluation committee. They hired a new manager, and there's no evaluation committee to not evaluate, but also have a call for managers. They just replaced them with the present manager, who is a member of the staff. It's a basically self-serving operation. It results in nepotism. If you don't have a democratic process, you're going to have nepotism and cronyism at the station. And I think a sign of that is what's going on in this election, because there's only one, and we had to fight for it. We had a press conference at the station. There's only one on-air panel of the candidates that's been held. It was held on Thursday. Well, guess what? It was not announced on KPFA. There were no cards, and it was also not on the website. Now, wouldn't you think that you're going to have an election for the local station board members, that you would announce that you're going to have a panel with those board members so people could listen? It was in the middle of the day. Most working people who are not able to listen to the radio would not be able to hear it. I have not heard whether they're going to replay it. So the members are being disenfranchised, in my view. Now, we talked about Ian Masters. He's on 9 hours a week. There could have other community programs on. Somebody called up on Thursday and said, why don't we have more talk shows? We could have a talk show between 3 and 4. There's so many other things, but that is, the manager has not even had a report to the listeners, which is required, where he reports to the listeners and says, do you have questions? Do you have comments? What would you like to see? In this election, they could have sent out a survey along with the ballot saying, what do you think about KPFA? What would you like to see? This program, that program? Where would you like to see KPFA go? It wasn't done. And it's not a technical problem. It's not even a financial problem for them to send out a survey asking the members what they want to see. So there, in my view, is a corporate takeover. They want to get rid of the elected station board members, and they want to put in a self-appointing group like at KQED that really runs the operation. And I think that we need to open up Pacifica. There's a pressing need in this country to deal with the issue of racism, of discrimination, of war, of what's happening in education, what's happening with the climate. And you're not going to you're not going to get that with corporate-controlled media, because the corporations and the oil companies and the utilities do not want people to know what's happening in this country. So that's why we ask and urge you to vote for Rescue Pacifica. And also, the last point I want to make is the fight to protect journalism. Because, as we all know, with Julian Assange and Mumia Abu-Jamal, journalists are being put in jail. And also at KPFA, a journalist, Frank Sterling, who was an apprentice trainer. They canceled the apprentice program without any discussion, and didn't let people know. There's no folio. They could have a folio online for people to find out what's happening. New shows, new issues, no information in the membership. I think it's contempt for the membership. But what we're saying is that we need to bring KPFA back to the listeners. We need to bring a democratic functioning. And Frank Sterling was attacked and arrested at Antioch by the police because he's been covering the vicious attacks by these racist police against black and brown community members in Antioch. And we said, look, we brought Rescue Pacifica, brought a resolution to the local station board. Let's call for his dropping of the charges against Frank Sterling. And these members opposed it. Not only did they oppose that resolution, our own journalist, but one of the members, Sharon Adams, who's running, actually said that maybe he should have been arrested because she read in a Richmond newspaper, or an Antioch newspaper that supports the police, that he was guilty of charging the police. So here at the KPFA board, you have actually a board member who is with the protectors saying that Frank Sterling should have been arrested and we should not call for his freedom. What kind of station would not defend its own journalist? I have to ask our audience and listeners, I mean, where is this going and where is this coming from? The manager as well said, we're not a political party. In other words, you have to be a political party to call for the release of a journalist at a station. This is the mentality of the protectors and the present management, who really don't want the listeners to know even that there's an election. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Hi, my name is Padma Vinasitambi, and I want to thank you all for being here and listening to us. And it's really great that I live in Oakland, so coming up to San Jose and seeing people here who are listening to KPFA, that's great. Some years ago, I've been a supporter of KPFA for many years, and I've been very happy with it. But recently, I kept hearing news reports that seemed to be slightly off, and it was becoming a little bit more frequent. And I thought, well, there's something going on here. At that time, I didn't know who that person was. Now I know it was Ian Masters. And, I'm not a fan of wars. I've seen, we've gone through so many wars here. We had the whole Vietnam War. Everybody was upset about it. But now what? Now we have United States going to Vietnam, and, they have no problem. It's like, why did all those Americans die? We had the communists took over Vietnam, and now we are friendly with them. So, in my opinion, that was a waste of American lives. And as most of us know, what's going on in Ukraine is a proxy war, but you won't hear that in most of the corporate-funded newspapers. And that's where we come to KPFA, because it's one of the few places where you can actually hear that side of the story. That side of the story which is never reported in NPR or public radio, and certainly not in CNN, where they bring all the washed-up generals to support the war. So here I am, suddenly kind of getting a little upset with KPFA, because this is the only radio that I could listen to and feel like, here's a radio that represents my thoughts. And so then I thought, that's not good. And then I went home and I was reading on the internet to see what's going on, and I ran into an article written by Ann Garrison, who is also in our slate. I didn't know her at that time. And in her article, she explained some of the other reports, not Ian Masters, but other people who are also inviting people who are on the other side of a progressive mindset. I'm also with JVP, Jewish Voices for Peace, and we go and talk to Congress people, and we always find that even though they are progressive, it's really difficult to get them to sign certain bills in the HR bills. So here in Ann Garrison's report, she's talking about this other reporter who brings in people and never asks them questions that are, necessary. Like, she's always supporting. It's a one-sided report. And I found that kind of really depressing. And so then I thought, let me look up and see what I can do. And, fortuitously, there was LSB voting going on, and so I joined, and here I am. and in that process, I met the Rescue Pacifica slate, and I've come to understand through the myriad details, that some of which Steve has been going through, of how there's so much dysfunction in KPFA and how it's been going on for a long time. And it makes total sense. I mean, I've seen BBC in the old days and what it is now. So many of these, and the Guardian newspaper in England, and then later on how they changed with Assange. And then we have journalists like Seymour Hersh that every newspaper wanted to grab, and suddenly his articles are not being printed in New York Times anymore. What does that say about the media in the United States? Well, what it says is, it's natural as an extreme capitalist country, it's money that finally talks. And that money is what's running everything these days. When I talk to those progressive Congress people, their main concern is, how will they get reelected again? How will they get the funds when there are other Congress people who are against them, who are getting financed by corporations? So our society has been put into a place where it's big money versus us, and we have the fear of losing our voice. The only chance we ever have any say is when we go and vote, and the only voice that we have here that we can listen to is KPFA, and that is being diminished over the years slowly. So it's imperative that we all do something now, and that's why I joined. And I am hoping that we can bring sunlight to this. All the things that Steve mentions, a lot of people don't understand this. They think there's a bunch of bickering going on, and they don't know why. And it's really hard to explain that in a few minutes. So we have to find a way for people to really get the context of what's going on, so that they truly understand that KPFA is been under attack for a long time, and we might lose. Anyway, so I urge you to vote for us in our slate, and I'm hoping that if I get elected, that I can do something to bring some sunlight to this. Thank you very much.
All right, and now Rich Stone.
Yeah. First of all, like others, I'd like to thank you for hosting this event. I was previously discussing with a couple of you, and I actually, the name came to mind finally. Is called, there's a very similar type of community-based center like the one you run here in Berkeley, called the Grassroots House, and just when I worked on the community advisory board, we would host our meetings, and even had forums that are very similar to this, but albeit it's in Berkeley. And like I said, what's really inspiring me, that even though as Steve and others said, this is the only forum that they've had so far. I think it's. It's really great and hopeful to actually reach out to other members of the community. Because when I was on the community advisory board, we actually hosted forums, but it was really difficult in terms of time time constraints in order to do things that weren't local, but we still had people come from all over I would say the immediate Bay Area. So I've I am an anti-war vet myself. I served, in the Navy, and from '84 to '88, it all culminated when I, served in this operation that's very similar to some of the the problems that are brewing in the Straits of Hormuz in Iran, with them imposing or allegedly imposing a naval blockade on oil tankers coming in and out of the Gulf. And I briefly heard about it on the news, but that was in fact the interventionist war known as Operation Praying Mantis, that basically in effect sank 2 Iranian frigates and killed over 300 sailors. But it was after being out, I think that when I would say Operation Desert Storm hit, when I primarily became I'm not primarily, but at first became an activist, and then probably the mid '90s. I would say maybe '92 or '93 is when I started listening to KPFA, in earnest, and has been a listener subscriber ever since. And what brought me to KPFA, because like I said, aside from being a delegate to I'm a postal worker. I'm a janitor. I've been working there for 30 years. I've been worked on the local union, APW, American Postal Workers Union, since probably about not all the time, probably since 2001 or 2002, and I'm currently the trustee and also a delegate to the Labor Council. So this is what actually brought me to KPFA, is because they had a show called The Morning Mix that existed years ago. When they dissolved it, the Labor Council had actually passed a resolution to insist that KPFA would reinstate it, because it was more of a community, a broadly community-based programming type of thing where you would actually have different shows throughout the course of the week, instead of just the one host, and just like ripped from the news feed sort of a journalism type of journalism going on. So the resolution did pass, but what happened afterwards, there was 2 staff members from KPFA, or actually programmers, actually came, one to defend the resolution. That would be Andre Soto. He had a good political and music show, and then Philip Baldry, as you may know, he's the one that spoke up against, and apparently was convinced enough members of the the delegates in the Labor Council, which I also work on the Economic and Social Justice Committee. We basically were the ones that sort of, formulated that, for the, and gave it to the executive board to vote upon. And like I said, it looked like it was going to happen at first, but they voted to overturn it just a month after they passed it, and I just thought that was outrageous. And I knew there was an LSP election coming up, and after talking to a couple, people included in the, a friend of mine who runs, like I said, the similar type of organization is called the Grassroots House in Berkeley, said, well, you should serve on the Community Advisory Board. He's also like one of the known the de facto founders of the California Green Party too, because he actually established some sort of a Green Party working group, and the mid or late 80s. I can't remember, it was before my time. So serving on the Community Advisory Board, and when the financial situation with WBAI, started to happen, and after what was that hurricane Sandy, I believe, and plus we flooded the offices, and also they were paying an outrageous amount for the for the radio tower, and it was basically. I really saw this is where even though I'd listened for years, it took a couple of years or a few years on the community advisory board just to see the internal politics and and how the divisiveness, because I usually try to stay clear of it, but once once the financial situation started besetting, that's when I sort of like changed my mind. I'm a little bit, in fact, quite a bit more outspoken, than I used to be. So that's when I decided, in 2021, that was my initial run for the the LSB, I even dating back to the community advisory board, I really wanted to reinstate the program council, because that's something that we had discussed at our meetings. So that's always been like a goal and focus on mine of mine to do just that, and I'm just really glad, really proud to be running the second time, and I just once again, thank you for for conducting this forum. All right, thank you.
Hi.
No, take it off.
Oh, take it off.
Pull it forward.
Oh, I see. Hello, can you hear me okay now? Great. I'm Stan Woods. I'm also running for the KPFA local station board as part of the Rescue Pacifica slate. And I want to emphasize, by the way, we clearly announced several times at our Friday on-air event from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., hopefully it'll be in the archives of KPFA, that every candidate was invited to come and speak. And hopefully maybe they'll stagger in any time now. But it's not due to us, not to do any discouragement on our part. They're not here. Like Fadi Saba mentioned, I used to be in the local station board. I also was on the program council. And one of the things that we are unified about is, we're unified in our slate and many listeners, we want to restore the program council. Think about it. Why should a station that it purports to be way to the left of the corporate media, not funded by corporations, want to have the same operating model of KTVU Channel 2 or KQED or many other stations? Program decisions are simply too important to be left to just 2 or 3 people. And during the, I think, 3 years we had a program council, we made numerous decisions. And by the way, people didn't always vote for programs they personally liked. There's one program, I won't mention it, it's still in the air, I couldn't stand, but they had a wide base of support, so I voted to continue that program. And also, we heard pitches, applications, so to speak, from other people who wanted to be programmers. And sometimes we approved it, sometimes we didn't. And but then, sometime later, it was unilaterally dissolved by the then program director. And that's very unfortunate. We want to bring that back. As Steve and others mentioned, we want to restore the anti-war, anti-racist, pro-labor roots of KPFA. Now, we're not going to BS you and pretend like it doesn't exist anymore, because it does. But it's very episodic, very episodic. Ukraine war. There's many divisions on the left on the Ukraine war. I personally, the slate as a whole doesn't have a position, but I personally want to see military aid to the Ukraine stopped, and I want genuine peace talks, not like the farce that just happened in Saudi Arabia, where the main protagonist wasn't there, wasn't invited. With that being said, who better than KPFA to sponsor both on-air and in-person debates about the issue? People probably heard of the black trade unionist and author Bill Fletcher, who I respect in some ways, but I deeply disagree with in the Ukraine. Why not have a debate between him and Cornel West, or him and Chris Hedges? I think that would pack the house and pack the airwaves if we had that. But the other side's not really that interested in that, and it's a real problem. So we want to restore the program council. Sometimes the other side belittles that when when they don't want to emphasize it. But the station board has real governing powers. We're not just a rubber stamp advisory board. We no longer have a program council, but we do have the right to hire, as a part of the process involving the Pacifica National Board and the director of Pacifica, to hire and fire general managers. And several have been hired and fired, and at least in 2 cases, I think very unjustly. One was the late Gus Newport. Well, he wasn't officially fired, but he sort of pushed out. You might have heard of him, former mayor of Berkeley and so on. And we want the local station board to exert its powers, not in an authoritarian, dominating, top-down way, but in a way that makes real sense. Now, I don't want to pander to the South Bay crowd, but I'm going to. One of the things we want to reestablish, at least I think we all agree on this, we'd like to see in-person local station board meetings be resumed, albeit hybrid meetings in which people who don't feel confident enough to come still can participate. But also, we want to spread out through the whole listening area. During the brief period when we had one of our earlier incarnations, People's Radio, we had station board meetings from Santa Rosa to here in San Jose. And I remember our opponents at the time, I forget what name they went by at that time. Of course, we've changed our name, too, from time to time. They said, nobody will show up in San Jose. Nobody knows the way to San Jose. They made a little Roberta Flack pun. We had 50 people turn out to Retail Clerks Hall a few blocks from here. And there were listeners who wanted to know, how come we're the biggest city in the Bay Area, but there's next to no mention of us on the news? It's a real vacuum there. And Santa Rosa is much smaller, but Sonoma County per capita had more members than paid members of KPFA than even Alameda County. So we want to dispel this myth that it's a quote-unquote Berkeley station. If it was a Berkeley station that is 1/60th of the listening range, KPFA would have gone belly up many years ago. And so we want to spread the activities of the station throughout the whole Bay Area. And I could go on a bit. Others, I'm sure there'll be questions in the audience, and maybe some other station board members or station board member candidates will show up. But we're very concerned about the finances, but we have a different approach to the finances. I'm certainly not begrudging any well-paid psychologists or university professor or others who can bequeath their house to KPFA or can give a car to KPFA. I'm not in that category myself. And I would rather make us a lot more financially solvent throughout the network by expanding the listener base. Some years ago, I made a comment during a local station board meeting when I was on, I'd rather have 1,000 people give $25 than 25 people give $1,000. To her credit, the station manager at that time was honest. She said, au contraire, she'd rather have 25 people give $1,000 because they were more financially solvent and more dependable. A different approach. She had a very sane, business-like approach, but I think you can keep the station going, take care of necessary business, and still make it into a mass-backed organization. One last little tidbit why KPFA is so important. I've been originally from West Virginia, been here since my late 20s, lived mostly in Oakland, but briefly I lived a few months in Hayward. And I lived next to a very rowdy house of Portuguese-American construction workers. And these guys were not the type that listened to Joan Baez. They liked Metallica. And they were pretty party-hardying type guys, very active in their union, and I didn't think they were political at all. But once my car broke down, they gave me a ride to the garage, and KPFA was on. And I was a little surprised by that. The reason was their grandparents were refugees from the Salazar fascist regime in Portugal. And in 1974, when there was a new revolution in Portugal, KPFA had, I wasn't here then, I was back east, had pretty much round-the-clock coverage of what was happening in Portugal. And so therefore, they were lifelong supporters of KPFA. Not regular listeners, but they knew that when the proverbial shit hit the fan to turn on 94.1. And you really saw that, my last point, and then I'll close. In 1991, of course, we had the Gulf War. And I remember being at Powell and Market Street in San Francisco, and there were literally dozens of people who had transistor radios to their ears. You remember transistor radios? Like telegraph and so on. And they were listening to KPFA. And a lot of the people, like I say, were similar to the construction worker brothers in Hayward. They're not regular listeners, but they had enough of a progressive sensibility that they knew that when something was happening and they couldn't get it from KQED or Channel 2 to turn on KPFA. I'm afraid that's not all. I don't want to demonize our opponents, and I'm sure some would agree with me in this basic sentiment, but others don't. we want to keep KPFA as a genuine alternative voice. And it's really in danger now. And we want, but also one difference between them and us, they're sort of indifferent to whether Pacifica stays together. We want Pacifica to stay. Houston, Texas doesn't need an alternative. Forget about it. Washington, D.C., WBAI, plus all the dozens, Fresno, L.A., and plus all the dozens of stations that use 20% or more of their programming from Pacifica. So that's our goal, and hopefully you'll vote for us. Thank you.
Yeah. Woo-hoo! Way to go, Stan.
All right. So thank you all for making your presentations. I have some questions, and then I'd like to open it up. I would like to piggyback on what Stan did, because, you know, when KPFA was doing a lot of outreach, we didn't just go to San Jose. We went down to Fresno a couple of times. So a bunch of the members, and most of the members are from the Bay Area, we drove down on a Saturday to Fresno for a community meeting there, which was hosted by the local community station down there. And then we came back. These meetings don't happen anymore, and it would be great because we want to increase outreach. We want to have more people throughout the region, because you can hear 94.1 FM throughout the area, all the way into right now, Santa Cruz has a community station that repeats several of the KPFA programs and so on and so forth. And that takes a lot of effort to get people involved. So I think that was a very good point to bring up. So I'm glad you did. I had forgotten about our times down there. I have a few questions. The program council did come up. And I want to ask about this program council. How would you, since Steve mentioned, I believe it was Steve, that it was canceled by the program director, a paid staff member, and the general manager, how would you go about making that a requirement? Is there any teeth to be able to do that, or something that, or would you be able to bring enough people from the community, from the LSB, and from staff to de facto create a programming council?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically if KPFA and Pacifica are going to be defended, it has to be the people who support it, who listen to it. It can't be from the outside and somebody on top. Now, during the 60s, there was a mass movement in this country. And during the 60s, actually, KPFA had live programs from Sobral Plaza during the free speech movement. That was before the internet, but they were able to cover live struggles. We have to have live voices out from the people, from the community. KPFA used to be a lively station, young people, youth. It used to be busy. It was an exciting place. It's like a morgue today at that station. And it's not because of COVID only. It's because they run it like a corporate office. A lot of people at that station are afraid of people coming in. They may take their jobs away. They may take their shows away. That's how some of the entrenched people there think. It's a job for life. And frankly, the fact that the manager of KPFA would bring on an older white man who has ties to the CIA and the FBI for 9 hours a week, when we have so many youth, so many young people who could do great programming, that's a disgrace. Do we want to die? Is that what the intention is? Not to let the voices out? If KPFA is covering the real struggles going on, right here in South Bay, you have a struggle at Apple. I know I've had on my program, Work Week, Alexis Govic, who is a whistleblower at Sunnyvale, that they built her offices, or she had her offices, Apple offices, on top of the Superfund dump site. Wow. Can you imagine that? People were getting sick. She got sick. And guess what? There's no news reporting about that in the Chronicle, in the corporate media. There's news reporting in Europe, but not right here in the Bay Area. Now, who but KPFA should be covering those stories? And that's why a program council is important. We're saying one of the requirements of a manager is to evaluate the programs. That's never been done. So how can these protectors say they're protecting the station when there are no evaluations of the program? That's part of the job of a manager, and they've opposed an evaluation of the manager. So this is a program council would be involved in getting listeners, getting the staff, getting the management together. And how would it happen? You mobilize the listeners. That's how it happens.
Yeah. Right on, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. One quick question I'm going to ask, and then it'll be up to the audience. Yeah. This question is for whoever would like to, whether Steve, Rich, or Pakistan. The question of Ian Masters, and I read a transcript of what he mentioned regarding Mumia Abu Jamal, that he deserves to be in jail.
Damn, what a shame.
And he has a show twice daily on KPFA.
Garbage radio.
So, what is your thoughts? What are your thoughts about that? And that's one part of it. And the second part, I believe, the last youth show that KPFA added, youth and or person of color show, was Hard Knock Radio, which was over 20 years ago. So I want to ask you about those two aspects and if they are interrelated. Anyone willing?
So could you please repeat the second part of the question about
So I mentioned that Hard Knock Radio
yes
came into being around the year 2000, so 23 years ago.
yeah
It's the last daily show that is hosted by, at least at that time, 20 years ago, young people and people of color. Now we have a show as well, new show by Ian Masters, who has stated while he was at KPFK that Mumia Abu Jamal deserves to be in jail. What do you think about those two, and do you see a connection between the two?
Well, because I don't know of the direct relationship between Davey D and Ian Masters, I'm sure it'd be pretty safe to say that that Davey D would probably be thoroughly disgusted with Ian Masters.
What I meant is
Yes.
the station management.
Oh, this.
Not having any new radio shows
Yes.
put on by young people or people of color, yet having a show by someone who feels that an important person to the African American community
Yes.
should stay in jail. That's the connection I was speaking. It's like in terms of management.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I really think that I've always been under the impression that I thought it should be a role of the apprentice program, and to do something. I mean, my son actually briefly went through it before he help formulating the news for the 6 o'clock news, but I'm sorry, I really haven't given much thought, but I know that in terms of my sentiments, that part of the of the overall demise, I think has to do in terms of getting more youth, people genuinely interested in actually being having a stronger voice in programming, and I find that you're very you're distressing. So I'm sorry that doesn't really provide much of an answer. Other than the fact that if I do, and then my fellow RP members that are on the slate get elected, that is actually would be part of my focus to try to institute a more form of social justice awareness on certain issues that aren't really being addressed or being made into programs. I mean, I listen to Full Circle, but I think that and I think that's a fairly good show. I think Frank and others do a really good job, but no, I think that there actually has to be more, more of a sense of engagement and empowerment amongst the youth working in the program in order to actually have shows like or more shows that have the power and the stay-in power of shows like Hard Knock Radio. I mean, that's probably one of the most solid shows in my opinion that has remained consistent and through all the time that I've actually been listening to KPFA. I mean, I even used to listen to him on KPFA. I think it was KMBL when he interviewed Barbara Lee right after September 11th, and it wasn't KMBL that fired him, but it was Clear Channel. So, and it was shortly after that. That's when when he formed. But yes. I would I would do anything that I can within my purview, to make sure that other, types of show, and I would particularly focus, working within, people in the apprentice program. So, I know that I'm hopefully that, well, whatever.
Thank you very much.
Whatever people that is like, that they have on the young shows like Asian Pacific Islander on Thursday, and I mean the Community Advisory Board actually would conduct forums like that, and it would that would actually have breakout work sessions that would actually where you would actually be able to create ideas, and then we would actually fill out a community needs assessment report, and it's through that where you actually have a heavy amount of listener sponsor input through these throughout these through these breakout sessions that we had when the Community Advisory Board was actually a very powerful and solid.
Thank you very
so
much.
yes, I think that in closing, I think that the Community Advisory Board, if we reinstitute it, I think it would actually be able to play a solid role to work back in that direction to get more.
All right.
And yes, you're right. I'm about there is no youth apprentice program, but there's I should have been more clear. Yes, there are youth-based shows, but there is no apprentice program anymore. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully that was clear enough for most of you, and I was just segueing all over.
If you would like to add, this will be Q&A.
Comments too? Speakers and comments?
Yeah, they're gonna get.
Yes.
Yeah, if you guys could go to the microphone over here, the stand. If you guys would like to ask questions, and you could direct this to any one person or in general.
Is the mic on? How do you turn it on? It's on the mic itself? On the mic. On the mic. Oh, there.
I know, I'm an old person that can't figure out technology. Okay, yeah, I'm Diane Harrison. Yeah, this question is sort of related to the news. I mean, there's a lot of great programs, or maybe not so great programs. I've never even heard the one that you guys keep talking about. But on the news itself, it seems like they're using a lot of the API, whatever the feeds that come out of wherever they come out of, and they almost never mention the Green Party. They almost never mention anything besides Democrats or Republicans. Their news is better than PBS, but not by much. And it would be nice if it covered a broader progressive perspective than it does right now. And I don't know if you can have any influence on that as a board, but if you do, that would be great. Thanks.
You can go first. I think that I agree with the speaker that there's serious problems with the news department. They're public radio. They have these news feeds from corporate. They have these news corporate news feeds. In my view, it sounds like NPR. It sounds like commercial radio on KPFA. CNN, and that's outrageous. There's so much news in this country from independent producers, from independent journalists, from other stations that are going on. Why do they have to get this corporate news feed? What's the problem? Now, I mean, this is something we have to fight for. Where I'm fed up with listening to corporate sound bites. Really, do we need corporate sound bites on the KPFA news? I mean, that's pretty clearly what's going on. And, Mark Miracle and Eileen Alfendary have been there for decades. I think it's time for a new news leadership at the station. Why not get some young people? Why not get some young people doing the news? And, we are for news bureaus. We're for a community like the South Bay, the North Bay, Central Valley, to have a news group in those communities providing news. And we have talented writers and young people who can provide the news. And if we started putting those kind of news on the KPFA news, they wouldn't have so much problems getting money. Mm-hmm. If they could hear the voices of young people, there's so many stories that are being suppressed. I mean, I went to Foster Farms to cover that, the deaths of the workers in Merced, where they died, 13 workers died because they didn't have PPE, because the OSHA was not putting information in different languages. You have a large number of immigrant workers at Foster Farms. I mean, KPFA News never talks about the corruption of the Democratic Party and some unions. They never talk. That's too hot. That's too hot politically for them. And, and they've never challenged Barbara Lee about why she's supporting more money for war. Barbara Lee has supported billions for more war in Ukraine when people in Oakland and Alameda are going hungry, can't get health care. I mean, how dare you? How dare you vote for money for a war, billions and billions, when your own people in your own community are dying in the street? Something is wrong. And, I mean, of course, Israel. That's another, thing. I mean, these politicians, they're fighting for democracy in Israel. They say to protect Israel, which is an apartheid state, which helped apartheid in South Africa, which is a genocidal state against the Palestinians. And these politicians are for it. The Democrats are for it. They never challenge them on KPFA. Why are you for more money for this apartheid state? I mean, in fact, they support Israel. And Ian Masters supports Israel. He's a big supporter of the military state. He wants a better military state. He wants better imperialism. That's Ian Masters. He wants to make imperialism better. Well, I'm against military intervention. We need to close down all the 800 bases of the United States. We're supposedly bringing democracy around the rest of the world. In 1889, when the United States invaded the Philippines and Cuba and other countries, Puerto Rico, to bring democracy because they can't run their own countries. This is what they said at that time. And now they're saying that they're going to bring democracy anywhere in the world. What right does the United States have to go to other countries and impose our system? The AFL-CIO, and one of the things I've said is, why is the AFL-CIO getting $75 million a year from the U.S. government, the National Endowment for Democracy, in operations in 62 countries? I mean, they supported the coup in Chile in 1973. This is the 50th anniversary of the coup in Chile. And that the results of that are still harming the people of Chile. They privatized the pension system. They privatized the health system. They killed tens of thousands of people. The AFL-CIO, which was involved with the CIA in the overthrow of the regime, there's never a discussion about that on KPFA. They never talk about this. The corruption that we see in this country is not being addressed by KPFA. Why?
Exactly.
If you have a people's radio, a community radio, you will have a discussion of these issues. They're afraid of it. And as a matter of fact, WBAI and KPFK are putting on new programs. There are many programs. I mean, the 9 hours a day of programming by Ian Masters could be filled because there are other programs all over the country that are beyond. They keep it out because they're the gatekeeper. And what they really want to do is what they did with WBAI, because they shut it down in the middle, they illegally shut it down in the middle of a fund drive, and then piped in programming run by Quincy McCoy. And Sabrina Jacobs was part of that. But they don't want these other stations to have their own local community station boards. They want to run it from Berkeley. And that is something that we have to oppose. The people in every community have to be able to run their own programming, their own voices. And then we'll have programming. The last point, one of the things about the climate crisis, okay, was what happened in Houston with the floods there. Hugo. Because those floods destroyed like large parts of the region. And guess what? We have a radio station there, KPFT. But did Brian Edward Tegert in the news department ever reach out to people at KPFT to get their voices on directly? You don't have to get news feeds from the corporate media to get a report, because we have a station there. I always wondered, why don't you call the people in Houston at our affiliate and get their stories out?
Exactly.
This is what we need to do. We don't have to call anybody else. We've got stations in different places. We can have those people at the other stations, those journalists and others, giving reports. Why is that a problem at KPFA? And it's because they want a controlled environment where they control everything that goes on, and they don't want to build up these other stations. And that is a problem. That is a real problem. We need to support these other stations, KPFK, KPFT, WPFW, and WBAI. That's a strong network, and we need a network like that in the United States to protect.
Thank you.
Address the political party issue.
The mic, you're on.
Oh, this one. Okay.
Okay, you want to put that? No, this is recording. Put that.
Oh, you use this one.
No,
use both. Yeah. Use this one. Okay. On the issue of coverage of the of alternative political parties, that's an issue dear to me, as well as other brothers and sisters on our slate, because most of us are either with the Greens or Peace and Freedom Party. I'm on the State Executive Committee of Peace and Freedom Party. And give you one example, the late Peter Camejo, I'm sure most people knew who he was, one of the leaders of the Green Party, previous to that Socialist Workers Party, died some years ago, tragically. He made a comment to me and quite a few other people once that he got more extensive and fairer coverage on KTVU TV, based out of Oakland, which is now a Fox affiliate, they did from KPFA. And Phil Baldry, for example, and I don't like to get into personal stuff, but he often would have, if he would have a candidate from Peace and Freedom Party of the Greens on, it was so begrudgingly. It was like, well, we'll let you talk for 5 minutes or whatever, and then that'll be it. Now, look, many listeners don't share my beliefs about Peace and Freedom Party of the Green Party. Many are going to be voting for Biden, whatever. But I think even those who are considered themselves progressive Democrats want to hear about the alternatives, especially with 2024 approaching. For example, last year, the Greens and Peace and Freedom Party ran a left unity slate in California. We didn't do fantastic because some candidates got 600,000 votes. Zip coverage on KPFA. KFCF had some coverage in Fresno. KQED had coverage, but we had nothing. And except for listener call-ins, maybe time to time. And so I really hope that, let's say Cornel West gets the Green Party nomination and Peace and Freedom Party nomination. It's going to be put some of the powers that be at KPFA in a little hard spot. It's going to be a little hard for them to say that Cornel West shouldn't get significant coverage. So we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Any questions from the community?
I'm disabled, or temporarily anyway. My name's Peter O'Reilly. My name's Peter O'Reilly, and I've noticed that Saturday night news seems to be better than the week. I can't stand the weekly news. But last night they had an article on, the China, South Korea, the U.S., South Korea, Japan axis, and they had on Chirac, who sometimes gets on. He used to be on Flashpoint. But they do stuff like that on Saturday night. Why can't they do that on Monday through Friday? I don't know why Saturday night's so much better, but they used to KPF, it's gone downhill. I haven't been a member, but I'll join, I guess, if it's still around. But they used to listen to both. It used to be both sides of the story. And they don't listen to. They've never had anybody on that supports Russia that I know of. Maybe on Flashpoints once. The whole station is like pro-Ukraine, and I think they're a bunch of Nazis. Why are we supporting that? Why is the Democratic Party sending weapons to Nazis? So that's where I don't get it. It's disgusting. So anyway, Saturday's better. Thanks.
Thank you.
Maybe we can take another speaker.
All right, sir.
I don't know if that was a question, more of a remark. I hope remarks are okay. My name is Felipe Messina. My friends call me Phil. I drove down here from Modesto. I apologize for being late, but I ran for the KPFA local station board in 2010 alongside Steve Zeltzer and colleagues because I was fed up at that time. I marched with all of the protesters in 1999 to save KPFA. We camped out in front of KPFA, and we thought we took KPFA back at that time. But the left rallied around KPFA at that time, but then it broke up. Everybody dispersed, and then we thought we won, but we had not won. Because people like Brian Edwards Teeker were there, and they were like sleeper cells. I listened faithfully to Brian Edwards Teeker, for example, and his KPFA faction, including Philip Muldery, Eileen Alfandary, back in the day, Larry Bensky, with love in my heart, Chris Welch, and I believed in them. And they betrayed me. They fooled me for a long time because I was a young person and I didn't know any better. I thought that these people were good people. And then I started attending the KPFA local station board meetings, and I saw how vile these people are. I saw Chris Welch with the Nadra Foster beating incident inside the station. I went to KPFA to videotape a publicly announced KPFA local station board election, and I volunteered with Janae Jenkins at that time, and one of their cronies, forget the guy's name, he wouldn't let me in. They called the police on me. I left, and then the police arrived after, and then soon after that, Nadra Foster was beaten by the police. Just to give you an example of how bad things are at KPFA. This faction has changed their names. They call themselves KPFA Protectors right now. I was listening to about 1 hour of the previous forum that was on Friday, on the 18th. And from what I can tell so far, it is just more continuation of the faction of KPFA Concerned Listeners, KPFA Forward, Save KPFA. They usurped the name of the original Save KPFA people from 1999. It is a shame. It is an absolute shame. And I just want to honor everybody that's here. I wish more young people were here. But for whatever reason, it's hard to get young people involved in this. It is hard to get my coworkers involved. I'm a new member to the IBEW, a union member, and it's hard for me to get my coworkers to attend the union meetings. Nobody understands the value of having a union. Nobody understands the value of having public radio. Stan Woods understands. Steve Zeltzer understands. The whole Rescue Pacifica slate understands. But from what I can tell, this would be my only question. Where is the KPFA protectors? Why aren't they here? I remember in 2007 coming to a San Jose event, and then Con Hallinan, the Hallinan brothers were there, and then their slate, Bonnie Simmons, coming up, giving me a big old hug, and then Brian Edwards Seeker doing the whole thing like, we'll stomp. You know, what they do, what our opponents do, is the comparison of stomping homeless people compared to what we do for the people. That's what Brian Edwards Seeker told me. I believed in him too. I met him. I took pictures with him as a friend. But over time, it becomes so obvious what is going on. These people are stooges for the Democrat Party. The Wellstone Democratic Newell Club is their political faction. They probably get money for all we know. I wish I had more time to investigate this, to be an investigative journalist, but I don't. I write my few comments that I can while I'm driving to work in the commute if I'm in the passenger seat. You can read it at lumpenproletariat.org, lumpen.org, L-U-M, M as in Mary, P-E-N as in Nancy.org. And I've taken so many notes of listening to radio programs on KPFA, and it's all garbage. It's all garbage. All of it. Fake, leftist, pseudo-synthetic, left bread tube stuff. Why don't we have Max Blumenthal, the gray zone on there, right? Why don't we have John Mearsheimer talking about the true history of how the conflict in Ukraine happened? Why not? You know, I called in to Chris Welch's show, and I brought up Max Blumenthal, John Mearsheimer, Scott Ritter, and she was trembling with her guest, her phony, fake guest. And then they cut me off. Brian Edwards Seeker recognizes my voice, and he cuts me off every time when I call in. Then they put in a 1-800 number, so you can't even get through now. And they filter your number. It's just, you know what? I'm sorry if I'm upsetting you guys, but I love KPFA. I've been listening since I was in 7th grade. Chuy Varela and El Gavilan, Miguel Gonzalez, they used to let me read poetry when I was a teenager, when it was on Shattuck Avenue. KPFA was on Shattuck Avenue. When they moved to Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, Chuy showed me the whole station, how beautiful it was. And after the drama in 1999, Chuy left because he couldn't handle all the drama, how bad it got. But I want to encourage you guys to keep up the fight. You know, whenever I can come out from the valley, I'll come out. I was part of Modesto Cop Watch out there until my allies moved down to Southern California, and I was not able to keep it going by myself. Steve is always encouraging me to report from the valley. I'm originally from San Mateo, but I moved like 20 years ago to the valley. It's a travesty. I have so much to say, but I know I probably already exceeded my time. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts, you can go to lumpen.org or lumpenproletariat.org and read what I'm saying, because I've listened to every single radio program. It's Going Down is garbage. They pose as leftists, but all they do is protect the Democrat Party. If they critique the Democrat Party, it is mealy-mouthed, lame critiques, but mostly they frame everything as the boogeyman is Trump, the boogeyman is the Republican Party, the far-right wing. Yes, they're bad, but we have a two-party dictatorship. Yeah. We need to understand we're facing inverted totalitarianism, as Professor Sheldon S. Wolin wrote in his excellent book, Managed Democracy, The Specter of Inverted Totalitarianism. We need to understand what we're facing, right? There has been no coverage of the COVID-19 issue either. There's debates that need to happen with the COVID-19 issue, right? My son was injected with these injections that now Dr. John Campbell, Dr. Peter McCullough, many doctors have shown many studies about blood clots and problems with the injections, and shown it was all a scam. It was a big profiteering thing for Big Pharma, right? And also to curtail our civil liberties, our human rights, our constitutional rights. 9/11 was a huge attack on our constitutional rights, and the COVID-19 issue took it even further. And it was so confusing because when I was on lockdown and I lost my job because they sent us home after the COVID-19 lockdowns, the only people I saw protesting the COVID thing, the COVID lockdowns, were rightists and Republicans. And I was confused. I'm not going to join Trump because they're the only ones protesting this thing, but I'm going to keep asking these questions. And Brian Edwards Seeker has John Schwartzberg every morning, the same doctor. Why doesn't he have Dr. Peter McCullough or Dr. Robert Malone, or why doesn't he have Naomi Wolf, right? Legend of feminist movement, who has went through all the documents of the Pfizer documents and shown how it's harming all these people. right? There's so much to say. But I see people behind me, so I just want to thank you very much, and just peace and love to everybody here.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like
Thank
to
you.
hear from each one of you, but I don't want a speech. I just want you to tell me simply, why should we keep supporting KPFA? Would you do, each take a stab at that?
Yes.
Wait a minute. Okay.
Yes, thank you for that question. I mean, it's finally, why are we here in the first place, right? Because it's like the last stand, really. I mean, U.S. foreign policy requires every American citizen to be dumbed down and be distracted, to spend their time on Netflix and other alternatives so that they do not disturb the work of the State Department in their global wars and stuff like that. So they have got the media and everyone under control, and for a long time KPFA wasn't under their control. They didn't have anybody infiltrated into KPFA. I mean, if I would tell people that if I was the director of the CIA, the first thing I would do is have people in all the media, in New York Times, 100 Judith Millers, you know. That's how you control the public. And let's face it, we are controlled. You know, the brother there says, why can't he get young people to come and join the unions? Because the media has told them the union is a waste of time. They will go further on their own with the management. They do not give a voice to the unions. I used to work at UC Berkeley, and I'm a software engineer, and Opti came to me and asked me if they would help get the engineers to join the union. So I said, okay, and I asked the other engineers. They're worried about a few dollars, you know. So I feel like the only reason that you guys need to vote for us is because we are the only alternatives. And if you don't get us in there, KPFA is going to disappear and diminish, and then you will have nobody else to rally around. Thank you.
Yeah. While we're waiting, you know about the struggle of the writers and the actors and actresses?
Yes.
Okay, well, they're going to be having a national day of action for them, and they're going to be at the Netflix offices on this coming Tuesday at noon. So if you want to help our slate, maybe you can say KPFA Rescue Pacifica supports the actors and actresses and writers at that rally. Let them know. Because KPFA used to have a calendar. Think about all the different struggles, housing, healthcare, climate. Even Los Angeles publicizes this. There's no publicity on KPFA on our website. There's no calendar. We should get that calendar back so people know what's going on in Northern California. It's another reason people would listen to KPFA. But yes, what Padma said is true. The reason that there are no members of the Protect group, the protectors, quote unquote, the protectors, is they think this is over. We don't need an election because they prevented people at KPFT from running. There's 7 people they prevented from running at that station with the acquiescence of the election supervisor, Renee. So they think that they've got this wrapped up and they don't have to worry about the election. That's why they don't show up. And that is why KPFA management, in an act of management malfeasance, refused to publicize the only panel of KPFA candidates. Think about that. They're only having one panel on the air of KPFA candidates, and it was not publicized by KPFA management. They didn't let the listeners and members know that there was even going to be an opportunity to hear the candidates. Why is that? Because they really don't want an election, and also they have their own list of supporters that they've illegally gotten, actually. and they send it out to their own supporters, and they could care less about the rest of the members. That's what we're dealing with. But, we have to struggle to get the truth out at KPFA, have to get the truth out about what's happening in this country, regardless of if it's one voice. That's what I believe. You have one voice. Use your voice. And that's how we have collective power. That's how we break the information blockade. We use our voices and we organize. So I would urge all of you to look at this as the beginning, not just an election. The struggle that we face in this country is dire. With the climate, every day is another cataclysm, is another catastrophe in this country. And it's out of control. And the people running this country are out of control. They want to go to war when we can't even take care of the people in this country. They want to spend money on more the war machine in Asia when the climate, when AI is going to take over jobs of millions of people. It's really out of control. We need a political alternative. But we certainly need voices on the air and on the internet. And, one of the reasons young people don't listen to KPFA, a lot of people don't listen to the radio, although if you're in your car you do, is they have other podcasts. They have many other on the internet now. And KPFA actually has they could have 2 digital channels, as other stations do. They could have another digital channel, and they could have press conferences on. The unions, that rally that's going to be held on Tuesday by SAG-AFTRA at Los Gatos Network, that could be live on KPFA, a digital channel. They could say, we're going to have a live press conference. What's happening with the SAG-AFTRA workers and writers? Why is that important to all workers in this country? It's education, healthcare. They want to get rid of all the doctors and nurses, so you never go to a doctor and nurse. You could do it video. I mean, there's a plan to basically destroy working people and labor in this country. And we can use those digital channels. If we get in, we can fight to say, use the digital channels. But there's a dire emergency right now in KPFA and Pacifica, because KPFA and Pacifica can't pay the insurance on the buildings. That's how bad it is. So they've lost the liability insurance on the buildings of Pacifica, so you have to sign a form to get in that you're going to release your liability situation. So there's an emergency situation, and actually Ian Masters, and this is the crux of it, Ian Masters on the air was telling people at KPFK not to contribute to KPFK and Pacifica. He said, you shouldn't contribute to them until we get what we want. They said that the last election, they won. That's what they said. And Aki Tanaka sued Pacifica. They've cost over $500,000 in lawsuits. He sued Pacifica because he said they won their election. Well, under the bylaws at Pacifica, in order to win a bylaw change, you have to have a majority of the listeners and you have to have a majority of the staff. And it is true that the staff at WBAI do not want their corporate change, because under their corporate change, they would probably shut down WBAI or make it a repeater station. So they voted against it. It did not carry. The staff did not vote for those new bylaws. So what do? They go to court and they force Pacifica to spend over $500,000 fighting these court lawsuits. I think that's a wrecking operation. I think that's a corporate takeover. That's a coup. And that's exactly what's going on right now. That you can't have a fair and democratic election. When these people boycott meetings, when they don't put it on the air, that there's even going to be a debate, you're talking about wrecking the station, in my view.
Thank you, Steve. This goes to your question, however. Why should she continue to contribute and give to KPFA, given that you have these individuals that sue Pacifica, wasting $500,000 and so on and so forth? From my perspective is, I want to be able to vote and try to stop the stealing, the selling of the airways. But I want to get your perspectives from at least one of you guys. Why should she give her $25 or $50 or $100, right? If this is what's happening, that money's being siphoned in lawsuits and so on and so forth. Is it that we should still continue to support the flashpoints, the hard knock radio shows? Is it so that we can vote and try to bring it back into the fold? What is the reason?
Well, I think that and you know my. You know, I actually had a misnomer. You know, when I first started for the LSB, and I mean, I instead of referred to as the local station board, I erroneously, and I even told people embarrassingly enough, says, "Oh, I'm running for the listener sponsor board." You know, and the thing is, you know, it's some sort of, I think, you know, actually quite apropos, you know, Freudian slip, and knowing the fact that yes, it is the listener sponsors dollars that actually, you know, does run it, and yes, that is a very difficult question, you know, to answer. Why you or anyone should, you know, give it all, But as you probably heard some of the responses, and I'm going to say in my response, you know, you just have to basically reinstitute, methods that, and you know, like I said, I don't have as much long as history that you know with KPFA that most of the people sitting here at the table, or even some of the some of the speakers in the audience, has. I mean, I'm learning some great new knowledge, and this is actually actually what inspires you being here, because I really think that to have forums like this done done by the radio station itself, like I did when I was on the community advisory board, when it was a relatively good board, is actually a way to actually to empower the listener in a way. Like I said, we would have breakout group sessions, and we would fill out after having a few forums on an annual basis, fill out a community needs assessment report, and to me that is the ad, that should be the answer, for the local station board and other powers that be to actually create the programming via a programming council by the other LSB. That's the listener sponsor board that we actually had at our community advisory board meetings when it was a more relevant fixture. So yes, and I'm sure there's probably other answers, but drawn from the from the experience, I think that either having a more solid community advisory board, which actually in a way works as a de facto adjunct to the local station board, to reinstate that. But the thing is, the current reformation of what they call the community advisory board is a far cry from what it used to be. Considering they didn't use single transferable voting to vote, and thus they only got to vote in their cronies. So the only people that are actually
thank you, Rich.
Running the board is so yes. I'm sorry I went on a
we have
long
one
time,
more
but
question. We have
yes,
to
sorry.
end.
Okay. One more.
So all right, Stan Woods, and then we'll have that question, and then we'll call it a day.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me? Oh well, here we go. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. To answer the sister's question, I believe her question was, why should you continue to support KPFA if it's in such dire straits? Well, the simple answer, it sounds rhetorical, but it can be changed. I'll give you an example, and I'm not making a direct analogy between KPFA and the union. But 40 years ago, the Teamsters was hopelessly corrupt. The mafia had, it wasn't just a mafia union, but the mafia had a lot of influence and a lot of locals. We'll know for sure Tuesday, but in Tuesday there's going to be a conclusion of a 3-week nationwide vote whether UPS should go on strike or not. There were pre-strike rallies, I believe, in San Jose. I know I participated in some practice pickets, it was called. I'm not saying I uncritically support the current Teamster leadership, but things change. Against insurmountable odds, against the damn mafia, there's been a lot of rank-and-file reforms, democratic reforms in the Teamsters. Our opponents don't have a mafia behind them. We can change the situation at KPFA. I think as far as programming goes, if we win a majority, I think we'll be in a strong position to reestablish a program council. And by the way, the program council came about shortly after we recaptured the station in 1999. And it had a couple of caveats. That is, the general manager could null and void a programming suggestion if they could prove, and they had to prove, not just their word for it, that the program would put the station in legal or in financial jeopardy. And we agreed with those caveats. And none of our programming decisions was canceled based on that. So once again, if we get a majority, I think we can start the process of reclaiming the station. Thank you.
All right. And last question from the community.
I would just like to, sort of respond to the question of why we support KPFA. Is a powerful station. I mean, it is all over Northern California and in other parts of the United States. It's recognized. What? Okay. That's better. Okay. So I'm thinking, if we, implement the reforms that you guys are talking about and bringing more community input into the decision making and bringing people in, that will make a lot of difference in reforming KPFA. Also, I'd like to mention this thing about unions. Hey, young people are going to unions. They're forming their own unions, right? The people that are really some of the most oppressed workers see the value of unions, right? See the value of collective bargaining, and they're going ahead and doing it, whether or not the labor movement as it exists outside that supports them, and mostly they do support them. But it's like it's that kind of energy that I think we could tap into to really make KPFA more effective. And it is it's not middle of the dial, has huge reach. To lose that and to let that just go would be stupid.
All right, thank you. Thank you to the four of you for coming all the way to San Jose. Thanks to everybody here for participating. All right, thank you very much.
I just wanted to say one more thing, or is that possible?
Before you go, 101 Albright Lane Albright in Los Gatos on Tuesday. We're going to be there, and KPFA should be 101 Albright Way in Los Gatos on Tuesday. And there's going to be a mass labor rally. So if you can, be there to support the workers. They're our brothers and sisters, and they need our support. And KPFA should be broadcasting it and encouraging all their listeners to show up. This is what a community station should be doing.
All right, we have one person who would like to make one last comment.
Okay, I appreciate you bending the rules right now a little bit for me. My name is Gabriel Castillo, and I'm a street photographer, urban street photographer, and I'm not sure of my status right now, whether I'm a member or not a member, and I'll tell you why. Because years back, I subscribed to the ongoing deduction from my bank account, and I assumed incorrectly that it was like my bank account or like my healthcare system account, like with my clinic, where I can just register and I can find out my visits or my payments, my statement, etc. Nothing of the sort on the website for KPFA, and it's just a number, or I think you might be able to email something, but you can't see readily what your track record has been in terms of payment. So I have to call them now, and so all of this, I think, adds and it creates more obscurity, and it creates more an opaque system, not only in terms of what you all have been talking about here, but in terms of our individual contributions are not even visible to us. And that's pretty bad. So it's not surprising to me as to why the fiduciary in the bookkeeping part of this has been so funny or so suspect. And I just wanted to say that. And also, I was many years ago in the 70s under the news department, the department with Alan Snitow leading the department at that time. I was a field reporter. And it's just like Brother Steve here is saying. I was a young person then, obviously, and we had a lot of young people going around doing these field reports with our alligator clippers, with our cassette recorders, etc. And now it's it's what it is. And I believe with everything Brother Felipe here said, I think he's hit the nail on the head. I think that this the KPFA radio needs to be returned back to its listeners. And they're doing everything in their power, I feel, to sabotage this thing. That's directly my impression.
Thank you very much. I would appreciate if you could help us break down everything over here as well. Thank you.